grateful to have we're so grateful to have Abby join us. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of hearing Abby speak, I was so delighted to hear her speak at an event we co-hosted and sponsored with Nefesh a couple of weeks, about 3 weeks ago or so now.
Yeah.
And Abby is a Jewish educator, a speaker, a trans activist, born, as you might all know already, in a Hasidic family of rabbinic descent. So we'll talk and get into her book and her story a little bit more. I also want to point out that she is a stellar 9-braid pride challah baker. And
sorry, that was actually 6, if I may.
Okay.
I wish I could show you all. We finished it last night. This is the leftover from the decoration, the big rainbow thing in the background, and the rainbow napkins and the rainbow tablecloth.
You didn't bake us the challah?
But there's none of the challah left.
You should have baked us our own challah.
Well, I'll tell you, you can come to West Hollywood and visit us at Kol Ami and show us how you bake those chalot. And
I am
now, so you can see everything better.
In all
It's
seriousness,
just this small little screen just no good. There's a
David
trick.
Coleman, I think it's not muted.
David, could you mute yourself, please?
yeah.
I was just going to say, David Glickman, I was going to say, in all honesty, it's something that we can make. It's possible. If it works with the schedules, with everyone's schedule, I'm not totally opposed to the idea. Let's see if I can get a picture here, and maybe I can share a picture with you all.
Come here in the winter when New York is horribly cold.
I like the cold.
Oh, then don't come here in the winter.
No, I don't. I've been in LA. I like it. I'm not opposed.
Well, one thing that I'd like to just open by and then let you share a few words yourself and share a little bit more about your story and allow maybe everybody to have a few moments to share something about the book that they brought away from it. One thing that we always do at Kol Ami is really try to read books with Jewish themes, Jewish history. This is certainly steeped in that richness, and I learned so much from your telling of your story. It also carried so many Jewish values, and I was really moved by oh my gosh.
Wow.
I have to stop. So we can
Wow.
No way.
Then I split it into 2 and we put it in these challah pans, but yeah.
Inappropriate comment, but it looks like a basket of Easter eggs.
Okay, sorry.
No,
Sorry, David, continue.
that's quite all right. There are times in this story that I felt like I was reading this this story of this incredible period of time so long ago, something that my great-grandfather might have told me from the old country, as he would say, of blessed memory. But yet it's so modern and rich, and you're so eloquent and young and beautiful and told the story in such a touching, vivid, rich way. And something else along the lines of the Jewish values, going into, actually, I'm going to start with the epilogue. I loved the fact that you spoke of love throughout the book and hope and finding yourself. But the quote is, "But even the loudest voices of hate have been just a dark dot in the sea of light, the light of acceptance, tolerance, and celebration. I've seen more kindness than I ever expected in a lifetime, and I've learned more about the world, identity, faith, and in these past few years than I ever could have imagined." Such beautiful words, and just such a joy to feel that through your storytelling.
And I will say, David, if I may, I will say the epilogue, I think part of it is an intro to book number 2, which would be a lot about leaving the Hasidic community and coming out. 100 pages or so already written of it. So it's definitely happening. But I feel like the second part of the epilogue, specifically the final part, is kind of like after coming out. That's the intro to book number 3. But specifically, I do hope to one day be able, I've had the privilege to, like, as you know, like the event we did with Kol Ami with Nefesh, and I've done hundreds of events, and every single time I get to hear like stories of people sharing. So I'm hoping to collect all of these stories of love, acceptance, celebration, and like turn that itself into a book, hopefully one day.
Awesome.
Jane?
Yeah.
I've been curious, what surprised you most about your coming out process?
Which one? You mean leaving the community or coming out as a
Whatever, or both.
I will say actually, and that does go partially for both. After I answer, I will put a link in the chat. I actually wrote an article. I believe it was for Elle magazine after the book came out, and they wanted me to write something new, kind of like something that isn't in the book much. So I wrote about my experience with sexism after I came out, and I do have to say that one of the things about the, let's call that the outside world in quotation marks. One of the things that really surprised me is sexism. I think I was expecting that it's not but by the time I left, I knew it's not this like land of milk and honey, so to speak. And I knew there were going to be challenges everywhere and so on. But somehow I managed to convince myself that I wasn't expecting to see and then later witness sexism, because why I picked up on the sexism as a young child already in my community, and I always thought, oh, that's because of their religious beliefs. I couldn't understand why people would be sexist. Not that believing that there's a boogeyman in the sky, which is how I would call the God that Hasidic people believe in, because I just don't want to, I have my own beliefs and disbeliefs, so to speak, but I don't feel like saying, oh, their God is the only God, and so to speak, even within Judaism. So I call that the boogeyman in the sky. The version that they look at it, like, fine, they believe that their boogeyman in the sky is sexist or whatever, however you want to look at it. But I sincerely, I guess, have beliefs and have hope that sexism, at least not in the way I was experiencing it or in the way that I'm experiencing it, that I see it now in the world, I was hoping that doesn't exist. And I was really shocked, and not in a good way. And I would say in many ways that is what shocked me most. And I wrote, let me put a link of that. I wrote a lot about it. And to this day, sometimes I think I would say that people who are culturally raised as women, I guess, used to it, though I don't think anyone fully gets used to it. But like, you grow up and you're like, yes, people are gonna catcall you on the streets of big cities and stuff like that. And I remember a few months kind of into transition, and I was just casually talking with some friends who are girls and saying that I don't get it. Like, you can't walk down the streets without people being like, making comments. And I wouldn't say thankfully, I've never been physically assaulted, which might sound like, obviously, which is statistically, trans women, it's like 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3 trans women has experienced physical sexual assault in their lives. So it's like, I'm really lucky that that hasn't happened to me. But just like the harassment, and I remember talking with them, and they would all be like, yes, it's part of life in a big city. And I guess I to this day refuse to make peace with it, so to speak. But even to me, I realized I walked down, and I being trained, we're being like conditioned to ignore it and to not go into that. So anyway, sorry for the very long answer, but I would say, I hope that answers your question. At least one of the many.
I think it's a very insightful answer. And yes, welcome to our world.
It's like the one thing where women say, welcome to our world, and I'm like, no, I'm not happy about that part.
We're not happy about it, and we do fight back, but it does exist. And it's important to anticipate it, even if you're ignoring it as it happens, so, to keep ourselves safe.
Yeah.
I'd like to let's go around. I see some hands up.
Yeah, I would also like to, when people speak up for the first time, if you can please say your name and if you feel comfortable sharing the pronouns you use. Like, I'm Abby Stein. I use she, her pronouns. I would love if people want to share that. Like, I can see your names on the screen, but I like to hear it. if you feel comfortable doing that.
I'm Lisa. I'm she, her. I'm Jane's wife. I'm in another room that Jane. We're in the same house right now. I have two questions, and then hopefully I'll be quiet the rest of the time and just listen.
Don't be quiet.
You taught me so much about the Hasidic community, which was just good, bad, and interesting. But my big question is, I have my two questions, and like I said, then I'll shut up. Who are you still in contact with from the old days? And especially I'm curious to know about the ex-wife and the child and your immediate family. And being raised with Yiddish and German, or Yiddish and Hebrew, when and how did you learn English, and what did you know when you left the community?
Thank you.
And what's your
Such an
favorite?
honor, and I want that recipe. So Jane, so Jane
The
can make
recipe of
it.
the
What's the
challah.
recipe so I can
Rabbi
bake it?
Denise already said, and I believe, Rabbi Denise, were you talking about the prayer book? The which book are you talking about?
Yeah, and Mishkan Gava, the book
Yes, I
edited.
have it with me. I do want to say, and I don't think we got to speak about that, and we still need to connect and talk more. Yes. So the last 2 weeks, I actually did my first 2 in-person events since March 2020, were the last 2 weeks, and I was 1 week in New Jersey, another week in New Hampshire, and I was co-leading a service and a sermon. And both weeks I used prayers and poems from Mishkan Gava. So thank you first and foremost. For those of you who don't know it yet, check it out. Really powerfully amazing. And yes, it is. I didn't. I will say. I don't know who said about the recipe, but yeah. So I am actually working on a cookbook. It's very early stages. I'm still working on the proposal. It's probably not going to be for a few years. And I also know publishing a book is hard enough in terms of like how the industry works. Publishing a cookbook is a whole other, it's quite hard. And I'm working on several other projects first, and I'm hoping if they are successful, it'll be a lot easier for me, but I am definitely like working on it. And the idea behind it is to use most of it my mom's recipes, and then with own modern personal flavor. And that's literally what I did with the challah. So I used my mom's recipe for the dough, and then did the whole rainbow part. We can talk more about that later. Anyway, so the first question, who I'm in touch with. I have one brother who I'm really close with. I have another sister that I talk to. Well, more like sometimes she responds to my text. I think talk to is a very strong word. And that is it of my siblings. I have about 10 or 15 of my first cousins who I'm in touch with. Some of them really close, some of them we talk to, but in touch in some ways. And so, yeah, that is kind of it for the immediate family. Now, what I always tell people is I try to be positive. So I focus on my 2 siblings and my 10 to 15, like of my cousins that I have. Most people my age that I know, let's say most of my school friends, 2 siblings, 10 cousins, that's a really big family. Yes, for me, it's 2 siblings out of 12. It is, 10 cousins out of a few hundred, literally. Like my dad has 10 siblings, my mom has 8, most of them have 10 plus kids. So a few hundred cousins alone. So it's, if I want to look on the negative, that is really sad. And I do hope that slowly more and more will come around. But I try, and on a day-to-day basis, I try to focus on the positive. In terms of my ex-wife, so it's not even in this book, because this book ends as I'm like making that decision to leave. And yes, this is an intentional cliffhanger. Well, I had to make a decision, to be honest. I did write already an additional 100 pages, but publishers, and I don't know if every publisher is like that, but I know specifically for your first book, like they already had the page count of 250 pages on Amazon before I finished writing the full manuscript. So they weren't really keen on turning a 250 page book into a 400 page book. So they gave me an option either to cut down throughout the whole part or just cut it off at like that moment where I'm deciding to come out. And I felt that instead of, I want this to be as much as I can, a full picture of the childhood. And then we'll get to the next book. We'll get there. Like I would rather take this to be about becoming, and then we'll do another one about being. I don't know if it's going to be named Being Eve, but it's just that's how I focus on it. So point being, so I didn't get to talk a lot about the divorce process, but My ex and I never really fought. We didn't break up or anything. We got along. We had a lot of intense conversations. She was aware not about gender, but about religion. Well, I think she suspected a lot about gender as well, but about religion, I was very open with her. It got to a point where her family started being afraid that we were going to leave together. And they stepped in and at some point kind of kidnapped her. I know that sounds very intense, but that's pretty much what they did. And that's it. It went from us being together one morning to never speaking to her again. And her family wouldn't let her. And then we were separated for only about 3 months, and then we got divorced. I heard rumors that she was secretly already engaged before the official divorce, but I'm sorry, I need to charge my computer. But what was certain was that 3 months after our official after our official divorce, so just 6 months after we got separated, she got remarried. And ever since, her family didn't let us have any relationship or talking, and I haven't spoken to her since. Not, I would be happy to be friends with her. I think she's really nice. Her family, that's a separate conversation. But she is really nice. In terms of my son, I don't like to talk about my son's life today publicly. I think it's important to keep that private. We did get a very solid joint custody, 50-50 joint custody in terms of decision-making, so on, when we got divorced. That agreement is still intact, mostly. But even when I'm not going to say about where he lives and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk about that. But even when I did see him, it's always with a mediator. Like it wouldn't be like me going and picking up from my ex. There's always someone in between, just because they don't want me to have a relationship with my ex. I think they're afraid. I'm considered dangerous from a religious perspective, so they wouldn't let me. What was your second question?
About learning English, because everything
yeah.
that in the book you talk about Hebrew and I guess Yiddish, and so by the time in the book when you introduce Dad to your real self, it seemed like it was all in English. So where did English?
Well, that conversation went like a mix. I think I write that, and it was like the person who helped me come out to my dad was Rabbi David Glickman at his apartment. He knows some Yiddish. My dad knows enough English to go to the bank. So we all tried, and I was like translating some of it. So I learned, but at home we only spoke Yiddish. We used a lot of Hebrew, like starting from like literally nursery to read and write. My dad is Israeli, so he did speak. He never spoke Hebrew to modern Hebrew to us, but I did hear it. My family visits a lot of Israel, so I picked up a lot of it. And then we even started, like starting in 4th grade, we started studying Aramaic. And the school that I went to, well, first just in the Talmud, but the school that I went to actually had classes. We actually had Aramaic grammar classes. So pretty much, well, I didn't really speak Aramaic. I can if I think about it, but it wasn't like, we weren't like having conversations in Aramaic. But it was even more important, like the Talmud is kind of like a mix, but then when you started studying medieval Kabbalistic texts, they're also written in Aramaic. And they're even in a more like purer Aramaic, like the Zohar and other texts. Because the Talmud actually has a lot of Hebrew mixed in. The Aramaic is a very, very it's a Judeo-Aramaic, but the Judeo part is very heavy in Hebrew. But anyway, so like English is kind of my 4th language. We studied the ABCs at home, at school. We all knew enough to write our names and addresses, but that's it. Like I knew the ABCs, but like every time New York used to have, now they switched it to the hand and the person walking for the walk and don't walk signs. But when I was a child, it was still the actual like written out signs. And to me, I like always pronounced it walk because I knew the ABCs, and that was a 4-letter word enough to try to make sense of it. But again, we did in 8th grade when our English education stopped. So from 9th grade on, we had no general education whatsoever. I don't think there was a single student who could have a conversation in English. So I started around that time. So right after, as in the end of the book, when I'm sitting in that bathroom and starting to be online. So after like I was reading a lot online in Hebrew, like Wikipedia pages and forums. And I got to this point of like, it's time to learn some English. I started by watching this on YouTube. There was some free like classes that were teaching English to Hebrew speakers. So that was how I started the very beginning. So that was the very beginning. Then I took classes at something called BOCES in Rockland, which is kind of like high school for adults. And then I got a tutor through Footsteps. So Footsteps, I mentioned it in the epilogue and also in the acknowledgements. Footsteps is an amazing nonprofit, life-saving nonprofit, I would say, organization based in New York that is helping people who are leaving the Old Orthodox community. So they provided me actually with a tutor for English as well. And then, yeah, I worked on my high school diploma. By 2015, I was already in college. So I worked for 2 years between 2012 to 2014, like end of 2013, to get my high school diploma. I had this like very thick, like probably like this, literally GED studying book. And then I got my high school. I took my high school equivalency exam at the end of 2013. And then I started college in the fall of 2014. So I worked really hard to get my English and general education.
Considering that you spoke about not being connected at all, literally and figuratively, with technology, and then using technology to find yourself and to even use YouTube to help learn English is really amazing.
Well, it took me a while to learn everything that the internet has to offer. And I would say a lot of what I did know about the internet was about being told what not to do. So like we were always like the Hasidic community, like fighting the internet, so to speak. So there are all these rules on like, if you get well, ideally don't have a smartphone. If you need a smartphone for business, you need to get it make kosher, so to speak, to make sure you don't have access either to the internet or to the forbidden sites and so on. But like I know about Wi-Fi because I remember when I was like a teenager, they went on a big battle against digital cameras that have Wi-Fi connections. So there would be like, even if you don't have internet at home, but if you get a digital camera and it has a Wi-Fi connection, then you can, God forbid, get connected to the internet and so on. So I knew about Wi-Fi, I knew how these stuff work. And it took, yeah, anyway.
We had a couple of hands up, I think Lynn first and then Diane.
Okay, hello. What a pleasure to be able to talk to you. First, I want to say that I listened to you read the book as I read, and it added so much to the feeling that I was in the community. I can't say why, but I know it's true. And at the same time, I was watching Shtizzle on wherever that is, Netflix or whatever. So for a while there, I noticed I was starting to speak in Yiddish a lot more, and it was coming back from my childhood. And I was living in the Hasidic community between the two cultural influences, but it was very, and by the way, you did a really good job on reading the book. I was struck by the duality of how, on the one hand, your experiences were so unique to the Hasidic community, but at the flip side, there's a universality to it that when you're in a community and you're uncomfortable, whatever that community, it could be a straight community, whatever community you're in, leaving that, coming to terms with your own integrity, to be able to differentiate what the society wants versus what you want. And so I felt both extremes from your book. And so that was my comment.
Thank you. I don't know if you remember, but actually the last, I don't know if I should read it, but the last 2 paragraphs of the introduction is exactly that point.
Well, I guess I read it so long ago, I forgot.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. I'm just saying, but yeah, I love how you picked it up, and yeah, it's very accurate. I definitely try to, I didn't want people to read it and just be like, oh, this is a cool story about this community and lifestyle that doesn't impact me, but also like relate to the parts that are, I think, ultimately relatable. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'm saying the one line here is, just one line that I think really captures it. It's also a simple story of a girl coming of age. Yeah. As simple as it gets, simply growing up and the struggles that I think, the specific struggles and journey might be unique, but there are universal themes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was also struck by the effect or how much the Zohar was a catalyst for you actually coming, realizing who you are, and to stop questioning that, and to make it your own. It made me very curious about the Zohar. I'd heard about Kabbalism, but that really moved me. So
Thank you.
one question that I wrote down was, are there any rituals or spiritual practices that you still keep as part of your life now?
Oh,
From all that you learned through the years, and plus all that you rejected.
Great
oh,
question.
thank you. No, that's really good. Yeah. Here's what I would say. If I have to use the metaphor of a circle to think about my religious practices. So let's imagine that the Hasidic community is at point one, not because I think they're the most accurate way of practicing anything, but hypothetical, everything is hypothetical, so we can just put
Where
it
you
in.
started.
Yes, I made a 180-degree turn. I got really angry and I destroyed it. I didn't want to have anything to do with Judaism, anything in religion. After a while, I decided, hey, you know what? Some pieces of this circle I actually like. But I didn't go back. I didn't continue on the same circle, I would say. I picked up some of the pieces and went and created my own. And that is how I approach it. And I would say one of the guiding, there's philosophies almost, and my approach to rituals, to customs, and to so on, to Judaism, to observances, has been that I don't observe. I'm not observant at all. I celebrate. I celebrate many things. I love celebrating Shabbat and holidays and many other rituals. But I mean by celebrating, it's not just a cheesy way of saying it. It's also how I approach. Is there a certain ritual? Does this speak to me? Do I have a problem with doing what we're doing right now, logging in on Shabbat to a computer? And I'm to me, it's not just that I don't see this as a contradiction. To me, this feels like celebrating Shabbat. What could be more, we would say in Yiddish, Shabbosdik, than to be together with a group of people and discuss a book, discuss writings. To me, this feels relaxing. This feels like a real, traditionally, for example, on Shabbos afternoon, well, at least according to some traditions and the way I grew up, Shabbos afternoon in the summers, you study Pirkei Avot, which is one of the Masechtot, one of the parts of the Talmud, which are very, in Yiddish, in kind of Aramaic, we call that Agadata, but it's a lot of teachings. It's not halachic. It's not about laws. It's not legalistic. Just a lot of fun, kind of lessons of virtue and stories. It's really beautiful. 6 chapters in the Talmud. Anyway, so this is what Shabbat afternoon is for: to sit down with people and you just casually sit, you drink, you eat something, and you discuss it. So to me, from an ultra-Orthodox perspective, using anything online seems to be anti-Shabbos. To me, this could be the best way of celebrating Shabbos. So that is
Okay,
kind of my
Abby, I just
approach.
want to say you've become a Reformed Jew, and that, I would be happy
That is
to
a
be your
compliment. I don't know
sponsor.
if you meant it as one, but I will take it as a
You
compliment.
made it
Oh,
as a
absolutely.
compliment.
Absolutely.
And I would be happy to be your sponsor, to be part of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, because I'm telling you, you now got the essence of what Reformed Judaism is.
Exactly.
It's not to
And it was
ignore tradition, but to enhance it, to beautify it, to do Chidur Mitzvah. What better than to spend it with our friends and community talking Jewish,
Exactly.
right?
I remember having
With
to
you.
learn that, and to this day, sometimes having to tell people who grew up Orthodox, and they're oh, Reformed Jews just don't care. I'm there isn't just more, it's sometimes even more. I think about, I used to have that in college, for example. I started about 4 years ago or so. I developed my own way of practicing Shabbat, and one of the things I started doing is I don't do work. I don't see Shabbat as oh, there's a list of 39 things that Jews might have done in the desert that I can do, but rather look at the spirit of it. So traditionally, from an Orthodox or halachic perspective, the way they look on it is, okay, so they say, what are the things you're not allowed? Because actually in the Torah, in the Bible, it doesn't say. The only things it says is don't light a fire, and the rest, don't work. It doesn't say what you can do. So the rabbi said, these people were in the desert. The only work, they got food from heaven. The only work they did was building the tabernacle, building the Mishkan. So everything you had to do to build a tent in the desert, you are not allowed to do on Shabbat. But when you think about it, really, that means that for the next 3,000 years, we can't do what someone couldn't do in the desert. But if you think at the core of it, it's whatever you do during the week, make this day different. So that is, to me, like that is what Shabbat has become. So I remember in college, I used to have, I don't mind watching TV if something that is so relaxing. And specifically when you work the whole week, this is your day when you can relax. And so there will be like, for example, friends of mine who are more Orthodox, who wouldn't dare touch a computer or write anything on Shabbat because you're not allowed to do that. But then I studied gender studies and political science, which is like humanities. And a lot of our homework was reading a lot of books. They had no issue doing homework on Shabbat. And I would be like, if you ask me, you're missing the point. Because you're doing work. You might just be reading, but you're not reading for pleasure. You're reading for your homework. So that is kind of, and I would say to this day, that's kind of my, like right now I don't check my work emails on Shabbat. If it's something really important, then it's important, but in general. And a few other things, for example, that I took on is I light Shabbat candles every week, which is something that I started, to me, that was a very interesting experience because I started doing it. And later, a few months after I started lighting Shabbat candles, I also took on Kiddush, this idea of sanctifying and starting the meal. But I started doing it. It wasn't even for religious reasons. I was going through a really hard time mentally. It was before I came out. I didn't feel ready to come out yet, but it was still a really bad place. So I wanted something to ground me because otherwise I would go like week after week, like with not stopping. I always loved candles. And I felt that is a really cool ritual. So how about I start lighting candles? And it's also a very literal way of like marking, like, I'm not going to say I always light candles before sunset, and I don't even care about lighting candles before. I care about on Friday night. I light candles, and then I have to do something for Shabbat. That was my personal ritual. So that could have meant going to a service. It could have meant going to a meal or cooking a meal. It could also mean going with friends to a bar or going to watch a movie. But doing something that is not something you do every night of the week. And then later Kiddush, for me, did the same idea of like, before you sit down to eat whatever it is you sit down to eat, on Friday night and Shabbat and Saturday morning, you just stop for a second. The ritual is to do it on a cup of wine. A lot of people can do it in other ways. But again, I started doing it as a mental health practice. And I would say I've come in some ways full circle to the extent where sometimes I'm doing too much in a good way. Like I will be traveling, I will be doing events, being at conferences that are not necessarily Jewish conferences. I'm just working so much in a good way. And I need something to ground me. And it went from, I need something to ground me because everything is so bad, to I need something to ground me because things are really well. And to me, it didn't feel really like a religious experience. But then when you think about it, at its core, that is what Shabbat is about. And I would say one final thing, and we'll move on. But there's a joke that I grew up with, which is that one Shabbat morning, there was a cantor who at the service at the story happens in some shtetl, some small village in Eastern Europe in the 18th century, let's say. And there was some cantor who was just like singing very long the prayers Shabbat morning, and it was taking a while. And there was one of the people at the synagogue started arguing like, oh my God, you're taking away my onek Shabbat, my pleasure of Shabbat. I want to go eat. And part of like the commandments of Shabbat is to eat big meals. You're not letting me go eat my meal because you were singing so long the sermon. So someone told that person, let's say person B tells person A, who are you fooling? You don't care about Shabbat. You just want to eat your kugel and your challah. You don't care about Shabbat. You just care about your food. The story goes, the rabbi turns to person B and says, you know what? Person A is right though. That is what Shabbat is. Yes, it's about your pleasure. It's about you enjoying yourself, you having your food, whatever that is. And that is not just okay, it's beautiful.
Abby, you've stumbled on Reform Judaism, where we are more mindful because we have to choose to do things because they're meaningful to us. We don't just follow them by rote.
Exactly.
I love.
There was a question, and then I see Lynn's hand up again. And did I see Lisa's hand go up again?
I think Diane did. Diane had a hand up.
Thank you. I'm Diane. She, her. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
You can hear me? Okay. Thank you for coming, Rabbi Abby. I was tremendously moved by your book. I'm going to follow in Lisa's footsteps and ask two questions. One, my beloved nephew is 15 and my brother has decided to embrace orthodoxy. I mean, not ultra orthodoxy, but I've known enough that things have happened in our family and my brother will say, you can't tell anyone because it will ruin his marital prospects. So I acknowledge that I know of that in the Hasidic community. And I'm wondering what repercussions, if you had to worry about, if I leave, I have 12 siblings who are not going to make good shidduch. If that was, because that would keep me from doing a lot because I would worry about them. The second one, I loved, as Lynn said, that Kabbalah and the Zohar impacted on you. I thought I'd always heard that the spirit has no gender. It's not a male spirit in a female body. It's just a spirit experiencing a male life, experiencing a female life. But yours had specifically given a male spirit in a female body. I mean, a female spirit in a male body. So more that would be, interpretation. But those are my questions, and thank you.
Okay, for the second one I will share on the screen a certain text and we'll talk a bit about that. But to the first part, so I think the fact that when I left, I was already married for 2.5 years. So I was out of my parents' house. And to many people, so they look on it as this is less my parents' fault. So it had less of an impact. And also by the time I left, there were only 5 of my siblings left single. Everyone else was already married. So like my 5 older sisters and then 2 of my younger brothers were already married. So there was, but also, specifically the fact that it happened not when I lived at my parents' house, I think helped, but also the fact my family comes from a rabbinic family. So that is kind of, let's say that prestige outweighs the negative. I do think sometimes that I think for the first brother who got engaged right after I left, it was a nice rabbinic maybe marriage, but not, I feel like my dad wouldn't have maybe done it otherwise. I'm not sure. But ever since it has been, like my sister just got married to my mom's first cousin, which is like whatever, big family, whatever, which sounds like you were all like, why would you do that? But yeah, in my family, that's a big thing. Another one, actually, another sister who also got engaged after I left, got married to my oldest brother's first cousin, whatever. I'm not gonna bore any of you with this, the bush of my family, as opposed to a family tree, which everyone keeps saying, but meaning they have done okay marriages, because I was already married. What I was gonna say about Kabbalah, let me actually share something. So this, among others, I will put a link to my Safari profile. There's a lot of amazing source sheets on there that look on many interesting things. This is a text from the Zohar. And to look at the translation, we learned the bold part. Every person needs to be male and female at all times. This is very much this concept. The ideal person or the ideal soul is not male or female, but rather, I like this, for example, Dr. J. Michelson, some of you might have heard of him. He writes a lot of amazing stuff on queer, and he's like, his commentary on that Zohar is, individual mystic soul, gender feminine, first participates in an act of transgender homoerotic mystical fellowship with those of her fellow mystics, in order to at once welcome in the divine feminine, immediately switch gender roles to embody that divine feminine for congress of the male God. I'm not going to go into all the details, but the point that he's trying to make is that our spirits are all of it at all time. And yes, some of us are more femininity, more masculinity. I think that is at least the way I understand a lot of the Kabbalistic teachings. And yes, I think at its core, they would see the spirit as not necessarily being gendered, but rather that some spirits might lean one way or the other more. And ultimately, we need to all work to find a balance, I think, from a Kabbalistic. And there's a lot more. I will share the link. Please feel free to look it up. There's It's even I feel like every time I keep studying these, even the sources that I've created myself, I still keep learning more, and there's still so much that I haven't discovered yet.
Thank you.
Who else had a hand up? Anybody?
See Lynn's hand, but there could we like, is it okay if we put like for a second, a minute for people who haven't said anything yet to see if they want to share or say anything? Like, I love people who are very engaged, but just want to make sure we give a space for people who haven't shared anything if they want to.
Thank you. You're so good about that.
If there isn't, obviously we'll go back.
Hi, Christine. Of course. Jump in.
Hello. Oh,
Hi.
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment. I was reading the book and I had no knowledge of the Hasidic community before I started reading. I just vaguely knew of it. And what I found kind of interesting was that certain elements of it are actually very similar to secular American culture. Like when you're talking about your high school experience and all the work and all the long school hours and the breaks for coffee. And that wasn't dissimilar from my high school experience, even if it wasn't structured the exact same way. And there's like other smaller stuff like that comment you talked about, that person giving you problems because you shower every day. Because apparently men think hygiene's unfeminine. And it's like, yeah, that seems really familiar, unfortunately.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. And I think we brought that up before. I definitely know a lot of it. Part of me was not trying to be like the Hasidic community is so different, they're so weird, they're so whatever, but actually to be, a lot of it is a human experience. And I think I might have mentioned that when we did the other event with Nefesh, I remember, but a lot of the work that I do is not me trying to be like, oh, look, the Hasidic community is so gendered and so sexist and so homophobic and transphobic and they're so unique. But rather, I think in many ways, I see them as a mirror to so-called secular society, that they're just so radical, and it could help people to realize that, as he said, like our gender roles and like who showers more, who does like which kind of like soaps and you use, and we gender all of these things. And we don't realize it because we live in a society where that's normal. And then you look on a community that's maybe does the same things, but they take it to the next level. And you're like, oh my, that is not okay. But then stop for a second and think, and you realize that we're not much better in our day-to-day lives. So I think I'm really hoping, I tell people sometimes that what might be surprising both to the Hasidic community and to outsiders is that they actually don't live in a bubble as much as people think. I don't think they live out there in the middle of nowhere. They are a radical version of a lot of the problems that society as a whole has as well. Yeah, thank you, Christine.
And the beauties.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, because I think I forgot to mention this, my pronouns are they, them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Does anyone recall, if you do, perhaps you have a favorite quote or part of Abby's story that you might like to reflect on? Such a quiet group today. Usually we're all talking over each other and can't hear each other.
Maybe I should just leave and let you all talk. You feel more comfortable talking without me.
No,
I see Alan has a hand up.
No, that's not it.
I'm Alan, he, him. So you said that you kind of collect stories about people's coming out transitions. So
I'm starting to, yes.
All right, so I'm going to share my part of my coming out transition.
Please, yeah.
It sounds to me like you kind of had to leave Judaism to be able to transition, and I never felt that.
Can I correct? Like I at the time, yes, I felt like that. Now I know that I had to leave Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Judaism. I didn't have to leave Judaism at all. But thank you, yes.
But part of my transition included not necessarily coming more into my Judaism, because I had done that before, but kind of celebrating through my Judaism and having a naming ceremony, as you would as a newborn boy, with Rabbi Denise. And where I had a lot of support from my family. I had great aunts and uncles that came to my naming, friends and family, and a very positive experience within Judaism. In fact, when I talked to, before I came out trans, I came out lesbian 20 some odd years before that. So I was always part of the queer community, but what was I going to say? Oh, so I was talking to Rabbi, and the Rabbi says, God loves you as you are. And I was like, I never ever thought God never loved me. I thought people don't love me. So I had a very positive, very growing experience, and in with Judaism brought me closer with my community here at Kol Ami, in general. But I figured I would share that positive experience.
Thank you so much. I don't remember. Thank you so much, Alan. That is so beautiful to hear. And yes, you all are really lucky with Rabbi Denise. I know I've seen so much of her work, and I use a lot of her work when I talk to people and so on. But also I want to say, I don't know if I shared it when we did the Passover. Did I share the video of my bat mitzvah?
I would love for you to. It's beautiful. It's so.
If people want to see it, I can definitely. Well, the whole thing is half an hour. I don't know. Well, we only have 10 minutes left. I would rather continue the conversation, but let me put a link.
Alan, thank you. And while Abby is getting the link, and maybe you could share a few minutes of it, that's fine too. I believe David Goldman had his hand up.
And Lynn's hand up.
Or their hand up.
Yeah, actually, I go by he, him. And thank you very much, Rabbi Stein. I loved your book. I was amazed by your bravery and also the insight I got from about the transgender experience, how much better I can understand it now. Just as I became aware I was gay, I could never quite understand the transgender experience, but your explanation was so helpful. And also all that you spoke about in the Hasidic world. A large part of my family is Hasidic, and the bits and pieces I've learned over the years were tied together even more by all of your explanations. So thank you. And also your explanation about what you read in the Zohar about how women's spirits, women's souls can somehow be reincarnated into men's bodies and vice versa. That was fascinating. So thank you for what you've written and what you've taught us.
This is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this, and I'm so glad I could. It's the goal. Like if just one comment like this makes it all the hundreds of hours that go into writing a book, it makes it all worth it. And thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Lynn?
Yes, two things. One, I meant to mention that I believe you grew up in Crown Heights area.
I grew up in Williamsburg.
Oh,
Crown
that's
Heights is Shabbat. Quite
that.
different, yeah.
Because I was born in Crown Heights, so I have taken the Crown Heights Hospital.
It's still Brooklyn. Still Brooklyn.
It's still Brooklyn. You're Brighton bitch. But the other thing, when
some of us grew up on Long Island, so we.
What's that?
Some of us grew up on Long Island, and
wow, my girlfriend and I were just discussing earlier how technically Brooklyn is also on Long Island. A lot of Brooklyn people don't like to hear that, but
geographically, yes, politically,
yeah,
no.
geographically.
Originally it was all considered the four boroughs. Well, the four, but anyway, the four counties.
There were people who wanted Nassau to be part of Greater New York, but yeah.
Lynbrook was the dividing line.
Yeah.
But you were talking. Rabbi Abby, you were saying earlier how similar, God, I just went out of my head completely. What I was going to say.
Take your time, it's fine.
How the smallest things in terms of radical. And and David had asked the question, something that you surprised you or you noticed about that. It was your comment about if you wore the bow on one side of the hat or the other side, it was like almost a sin. You were banished, you were in a different community. And I've noticed that I look at people differently because of that. It's like, these little things that we do to state who we are. Do we were one earring or two? Is it black? Does it match the metal of my, so that's one comment that you made that.
Yeah, I will say, like, I can just by looking at a Hasidic person, how they are dressed, I can pretty much say, well, sometimes even the specific sect they are, but if not that, at least where the sect comes from. Like, they are Galicia, they are Poland, they are Hungarian, Romanian, Russian, Ukrainian. Like, you could kind of tell almost all the details just by the dress code.
Does anybody remember which episode, what the name of the episode was? Oh, Denise, you might know this, on the original Star Trek with the black and white aliens.
Yeah,
I
with
don't remember
both,
the episode.
you mean where both people had black on one side?
One side was black and one side was white, and yeah.
With Frank Gorshin, I remember that, but I don't remember the name now. But I think if you Google Frank Gorshin on Star Trek, you could probably come up with the name.
Try it.
It was Let That Be Your Last Battlefield is the name of it.
Was that it? Okay.
That's the episode, and it's in the original show. But now you're seeing my
Our Star
trivia.
Trek.
Now you see my trivia.
Amazing. So, Lynn, did you say you wanted to say something else, or? Okay, good. Okay, amazing.
I mentioned earlier, and I truly believe you. First of all, again, you're so beautiful. Your makeup is always gorgeous and on point, and I love
part of the credit for today goes to my girlfriend, but yeah.
Well, good for her, and I love the fact that somebody sent you a Sephora gift card when you came out.
Yes, someone did send me it was $120, I think, which came with, so Sephora has this thing for $120. You can do like they do you like, you pay. So in other words, if you spend $120 worth in products, you can get like a free like makeover, like they show you how to do stuff. So yeah, that was kind of the point of it, which was very sweet. Actually, the eyeliner that I'm wearing now is from that package that I got then. Still have it to this day, yeah.
The rest of us need trans women to teach us how to do our makeup.
Or drag queens like my fiance.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, some drag queens even beat us all. Like, some drag queens are like, oh my God. I'm like, how do you even guess? It's really impressive.
I do want to respect everybody's time. So are there other comments that for those that might not have had a chance to share something at the moment? And especially Abby's time. Abby, we'd like to have a Havdalah. It'll be brief, but we would love for you to join us if you have a few extra moments. But I completely understand.
Give me a second. Let me check in. Let me see what's going on. Give me a second.
Okay.
And everybody, once again, thank you so much. For those of you who, I think I've got everybody's contact information, and Jane and I will send out the next book information. We'll coordinate with the temple office for the date and get that set up for everybody. This has been such an enriching and enlightening discussion, and I'm so thrilled that we have some people that hadn't joined the book circle before, and we're so glad to have you as part of our conversation.
I think I'm going to be until 8, but I will have to leave at 8. But
Okay.
I will be until 8.
Okay, so we have a 4 minutes.
It'll be short.
Abby,
It's a short.
I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you. I will say we actually haven't gotten to use it yet, but actually have like a rainbow.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it'll be a brief Havdalah. Again, Abby, we're so
until 8 o'clock. Yeah.
We're happy to have you here with us at Kol Ami. We look forward to having you on the West Coast, and
Yes.
and maybe and teaching us and spending more time with our community. We're grateful, and we're grateful to David and Jane for kind of always like rallying our book circle and all of you that are a regular part. And so we join together. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei besamim borei minei besamim. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei haesh borei meorei haesh. La 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 la, la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechodesh lechol hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimhera v'yamedu, Yavo Eleinu, Imashiach ben Havid, Imashiach ben David. Wish one of y'all, everybody, a Shavua Tov, a great and good week. And again, to thank you to Abby for being with us and her great book, Becoming Eve, clearly a classic of LGBTQ literature and Jewish literature. And we're so honored that you shared this Shabbat afternoon and Eve with us. Tomorrow, Ben Freeman's going to be with us at 4 o'clock. He wrote an incredible book, Jewish and Proud. He's also an LGBTQ activist and Holocaust educator, and really one of the young new pro-Israel Zionist queer activists online. And wrote a really powerful book, and it's really going to talk about issues of what we need to do to be Jewish and proud in this world of increasing anti-Semitism. So hope you can be with us tomorrow online at 4 o'clock. David, Jane, thank you. Great to see everybody. Happy last moments of Pride. And next weekend, next Friday night in Temple, new rabbi, come be there. Also a baby naming. Hope to see you.
Will tomorrow be recorded, Denise?
Yeah, it's going to be recorded.
Okay, I have a conflict. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody, for.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, you guys. It was excellent. Thank you so much.